I'm Lori Chung. This is a breaking news report here on Spectrum News. President Joe Biden speaking on the attempted assassination of former President Donald Trump. Let's listen in.
The family of the victim who was killed. He was a father. He was protecting his family from the bullets that were being fired. And he lost his life. God love him. We're also planning for the full recovery of those who were injured. And we're grateful to the Secret Service agents and other law enforcement agencies and individuals who risked their lives literally for our nation. As I said last night, there is no place in America for this kind of violence or any violence for that matter. An assassination attempt is contrary to everything we stand for as a nation, everything. It's not who we are as a nation. It's not America. And we cannot allow this to happen. Unity is the most elusive goal of all, but nothing is important than that right now, unity. We'll debate and we'll disagree. That's not going to change, but we're going to not lose sight, in fact, who we are as Americans. Look, Vice President Harris and I were just briefed in the Situation Room by my Homeland Security team, including the Director of the FBI, the Secretary of Homeland Security, the Attorney General, the Director of the Secret Service, my Homeland Security Advisor, the National Security Advisor, and we're going to continue to be briefed. The FBI is leading this investigation, which is still in its early stages. We don't yet have any information about the motive of the shooter. We know who he is. I urge everyone, please, don't make assumptions about his motives or his affiliations. Let the FBI do their job and their partner agencies do their job. I'm instructed that this investigation be thorough and swift, and the investigators will have every resource they need to get this done. Look, as this investigation continues, here's what we're going to do. First, Mr. Trump, as a former president and nominee of the Republican Party, already receives a heightened level of security. And I've been consistent in my direction to the Secret Service to provide him with every resource, capability, and protective measure necessary to ensure his continued safety. Second, I've directed the head of the Secret Service to review all security measures for the Republican National Convention, which is scheduled to start tomorrow. And third, I've directed an independent review of the national security at yesterday's rally to assess exactly what happened. And we'll share the results of that independent review with the American people as well. And finally, I'll be speaking more about this tonight at greater length from the Oval Office. We must unite as one nation. We must unite as one nation to demonstrate who we are. And so may God bless you all, and may God protect our troops. Thank you very much.
Mr. President, when you spoke to President Trump yesterday, what did you tell him and what did he tell you, sir? Mr. President.
Shifting our campaign strategy, Mr. President.
Okay, see, President Biden, they're wrapping up some brief remarks on the attempted assassination of former President Donald Trump, his rival in the race for the White House. President Biden expressing condolences for the rally attendee who was shot and killed, while also condemning the attack on Trump and denouncing violence in politics overall. I'm joined now by Spectrum's Ayanna Harry here with me in the studio. We have Daniel Grimes in Washington, D.C., and our national political reporter, Taylor Popolars. He's in Wisconsin. Thank you all for being here. You know, Ayanna, I want to start with you. You know, President Biden didn't have a very long address to make here, but he did want to get in front of cameras and call for unity, saying that violence really has no place in our politics. And he has a unique position of being a president. He's the head of state, but he's also talking about his rival, Donald Trump, here, someone with whom he's had pretty personal disagreements with.
Yeah, Joe Biden and Donald Trump had not spoken to each other in years aside from the presidential debate until last night when President Joe Biden picked up the phone, called Donald Trump to wish him well. And one of the things that stood out to me in the president's remarks is that he is now directing the Secret Service to not only take a close look at what happened in Pennsylvania yesterday to make sure that something like this doesn't happen again, but also to take a second look at security protocols that are going to be in place for the Republican National Convention, which is set to start in Milwaukee tomorrow. So many eyes are on that convention. Thousands of people will be there. And again, President Joe Biden making it very clear that there is absolutely no place in the United States for political violence, saying that is completely counter to what our democracy is all about, Lori.
And to make that point, he says he's going to be talking again tonight from the Oval Office to continue the calls that we've heard from a couple of lawmakers now for unity.
Yeah, unity has been one of the uniting messages that we've heard from lawmakers across the aisle. A few lawmakers did attribute yesterday's shooting to the political rhetoric, but it was important, Joe Biden pointed out, that we do not know the political motivations of the shooter, of the alleged shooter, the suspect. In this case, there's still so much that we do not know about this 20-year-old. And so President Joe Biden asked people to be patient and to allow the FBI to do their work so that we can know more and then move on from there, Lori.
Of course, that Oval Office address at 8 o'clock tonight. And of course, you can catch it here. Daniel, I want to go over to you. You know, there have been calls, like Ayanna has mentioned, for unity from both sides of the aisle, but there have been some exceptions to that, with some lawmakers taking a different tack.
Yeah, and I actually want to just issue a call to everyone watching right now to go ahead and pay attention to what Melania Trump posted. She posted a beautiful note to social media just saying that we should all come together. And she wasn't alone. I mean, we had former President Barack Obama, former Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi, the current Speaker Mike Johnson, all people from Democrats, Republicans calling for unity. But as you note, when there's politics at play here, and sadly we have some people saying that rhetoric has caused this. And so J.D. Vance, one who's on the short list for Trump's VP pick, actually posted to social media saying that it was the Biden campaign's rhetoric that caused this. And so Biden, in a speech previously, had said that Trump would put Trump in the bullseye. And so some Republicans are pointing to those comments saying, hey, you caused this. But I should note, largely, again, Democrats and Republicans, Lori, are calling for unity in this moment.
You know, Taylor, I want to shift over to you now. And, you know, a lot of people have had anxiety going into this election. You're in Wisconsin, where tens of thousands of people are expected to descend on that city for the Republican National Convention. How will this shooting, this attempted assassination, affect the mood, and how much of a shadow is it going to cast over the event there?
Well, I think it's safe to say that this assassination attempt completely alters the trajectory of how this convention was going to play out. You could see behind us the downtown Milwaukee skyline, but there's fencing up. A good portion of this city is now shut down with a gigantic police presence. And while a lot of that was going to be in place had yesterday's shooting not happened, it's now going to be an even more heightened security event. And we just heard from President Biden talking about how he's directing the head of the Secret Service to review all of the security measures in place for this convention. He's also asking that an independent review be done about what happened in terms of security failures at the Trump rally yesterday. So this is now kind of a bipartisan whole of government approach to figuring out what went wrong yesterday and how to ensure that this event here is going to go off smoothly. But as you alluded to, over 50,000 people are set to be here. Thousands of members of the media, thousands of prominent Republicans and Republican delegates and local office holders from across the country. So security is going to be very intense, and it will take multiple layers of magnetometers, airport-style security to get where people need to go. But as people start arriving, especially today, it's going to be interesting to pick their brains to see how they're feeling. I think there's a big sentiment to rally behind former President Donald Trump, who says he's going to come here, but then also be, extra aware of everything that's going on.
No doubt that will be top of mind for all of the people coming there. And a lot of people around the country want to know how this happened and why. And Ayanna, to you, President Biden there said we don't really know what the motive is here, but we are learning some things about the shooter. Yes,
we're learning a bit more about the shooter. New York One, our New York City station, has confirmed that there were explosive devices or materials to make, materials to make explosive devices found in the shooter's car. Investigators in Pennsylvania are also moving in on a location where it's believed either the shooter or his family live. So we're learning more about this 20-year-old, but the president was correct. We do not know, we don't have exact details on what his potential motive might have been. But what we typically see in investigations like this is that authorities will look into people's social media, their emails, their communications with other people. Were they reading books? Were they posting online? And so some of those details may give greater insight into why this young man decided to, apparently go up on the roof and to shoot towards the former president of the United States as he was addressing a crowd filled with thousands of his supporters, Lori.
Well, not only why, but how. That is a big question here. And Daniel, I want to ask you, there are legitimate questions about the security plan for that rally, how this was able to happen. How much fallout is the Secret Service facing after this?
Well, you heard the president there remark that the FBI, the Secret Service, they gave him really a full, detailed account of what happened. But he also said that he is going to expect a independent review of what happened yesterday, and he said he's going to make that available to the American people so we can find out what happened and the failures that happened, because I've been seeing reporting that a lot of audience members alerted local police and authorities that, hey, this guy is scaling the roof, we should do something about that, and somehow that broke down too. Secret Service wasn't able to actually do anything. So that's one of the questions they're going to have to face. Obviously, James Comer, the head of the Oversight Committee, has said he wants to see the head of the Secret Service come before his committee later this month. The House Speaker on NBC this morning said that he's going to launch a full-scale investigation. So we're going to see multifaceted approach to figure out the failures here, what happened, and just to make sure this doesn't happen again, Lori.
It makes me think of how this is going to then affect the politics of this race, Daniel, as they continue to ask those questions. And for that, Taylor, I want to ask you, how should we expect to see the messaging in this race change? What should we see and expect from the candidates in the race, their campaigns, and how they approach each other going forward?
Well, we're seeing a drastic change already. The Biden campaign has paused all of their political advertising. They just announced that President Biden, who was set to travel to Texas tomorrow to deliver a big speech, is postponing that trip. He's set to do a sit-down interview with NBC News from the White House tomorrow rather than down in Texas. And from the Trump campaign, we've seen the former president post on Truth Social earlier today a message of unity, and we just heard Biden echo that message of unity as well. So it'll be really interesting. As Ayanna mentioned, these two presidents spoke last night. It's very rare that they interact. So the question is, moving forward, does this really change the tone in a permanent way between now and November, or is this just the immediate aftermath, and will we kind of default to where things were? So it'll be interesting to watch.
Well, we'll have to watch and see, of course, how that shakes out. Ayanna Harry, thank you. Taylor Popolars and Daniel Grimes, thank you for your time and your insight on this. And again, just want to reiterate, President Biden holding an Oval Office address later tonight. That's at 8 p.m. You can catch that here on Spectrum News. For now, I'm Lori Chung, going to return you to more news of the day here on Spectrum News. A former North Carolina governor's home is the oldest style of Italian architecture in the country. Next on Spectrum News, we take you there in today's